This time on Watchers of Tomorrow, exterminate!
Hello everyone, welcome to Watchers of Tomorrow, the sci-fi review and critique show that's mastered the power of statics. My name is Gep, and I'm joined as always by my friend and co-host Dr. Isix.
Hi!
And I'm sure there's a few people who showed up for Next Generation.
Yes.
And been listening to our Next Generation stuff, and you're like, yay, I found a Next Generation podcast. And now you're like, what in the heck are Daleks doing here?
Well, you see, depending on your interpretation of the link to comic book adaptation, the X-Men have links to Star Trek The Next Generation, and through other Marvel sort of connections, they also have connection to Doctor Who, and it's all the same continuity, right?
Yeah, and everything is that kid imagining a snow globe.
Insane elsewhere. Which I believe Doctor Who has been attached to as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure most things I would have to look up something that has.
Yeah, there's a whole big chart. It's hard to keep track of.
It's fun. I think it's the best example of why canon is stupid. You should just stop worrying about it.
Because it's all in the head of this one kid. It's fine.
So yeah, I repeat this over and over and over because it's a thing we do. But every 10 episodes, we give ourselves a bit of a break so that we can do something else, get away from just talking endlessly about Star Trek, get some one-off episodes for new people to jump in without having to listen to 2 years of back episodes.
Indeed.
So this time we're not doing a movie per se. We are doing a feature-length episode of Doctor Who because that's how Doctor Who used to be.
Yes, it was very serialized with, between 1 and I think 14 episodes, sort of adventures where, this is the big, conflict that we're going to be facing here, and it's going to be many, many episodes, and about half of them tend to be padding.
Mm-hmm. I remember my first experience with classic Doctor Who, which was my first experience with watching Doctor Who generally, because this was years before New Who. Mm-hmm. In high school, one of my teachers decided he wanted to do a sort of sci-fi literature class.
Oh, nice.
And he showed us the Baker Dalek thing. I forget if that was Genesis or...
Yeah, the Genesis of the Daleks is probably his most famous adventure with them.
Yeah, so he showed us Genesis of the Daleks because it has the big, emotional, morally ambiguous decision thing in it, and we could discuss it in class. I think he also didn't know how long old Doctor Who was because we wound up watching it for 3 consecutive classes.
It's it's still going on. Oh, yes.
The thing was 3 hours long, all told. So...
Yes. It is an epic Doctor Who story as well as Dalek adventure, and it is perhaps one of my favorites. And if we weren't doing this one today, I would have suggested perhaps we would do that one. And so it's high on my list as far as ones that I find as both enjoyment as well as stuff that's kind of impactful as far as classic Doctor Who's goes.
Now, I was always very surprised by this because, the old TV wasn't all like this. Mm-hmm. People talk about old television like it was all weird, but Doctor Who was very specifically these weird serials. So
yes.
Just why you have to be used to this long thing. Because when I was a kid, my mom introduced me to one of her young obsessions from when she was watching old British TV, and I watched so many episodes of The Avengers, and they are all one-off half-hour stories.
Yeah.
Or I think 50 minutes, actually. But and that was this era of TV, that aired in the 60s.
Yeah, so Doctor Who was kind of its own thing, I've heard people sort of describe it's it's basically this sci-fi soap opera.
Yeah. It very much is. Also, if you want some really stupid old sci-fi adjacent stories, watch The Avengers.
Yes.
They have some of the dumbest sci-fi villains. It's old kind of spy sci-fi. Somebody has a laser cannon or whatever, but it is so amazingly worth it.
Do they put it on the moon and call it a Death Star?
No, they didn't put anything on the moon. I don't think they had space travel yet.
British TV had a number of sort of spy sort of shows there, and The Avengers is one of the ones I'd like to give a try at some point. I just haven't gotten around to it.
Get the collection with Deanna Rigg in it. It's the best place to start.
All right, cool. But we're talking about Doctor Who today. Well, we can't
Yes,
meander too far.
Oh, I can meander. I can meander all over the damn place just to watch me.
But this thing is six almost half-hour episodes. It's almost Lord of the Rings level here.
It really is. Though, speaking of meandering, I would expect that if you focus on mostly the important plot parts, the synopsis of this is going to be about 10 minutes long.
Yeah, I do put a few extra things in my synopsis for this one here, but I try to keep it sort of bare bones when I can. There's a certain amount of so-and-so enters the room, gets angry, then leaves sort of stuff that's like, all right, I'll kind of gloss over some of that because it just keeps happening.
Yeah, a decent amount of people just staring at each other. There's a lot of weird in this.
So we should probably, before we get too much in the cast and crew, mention that this is a adventure of Doctor Who that technically no longer exists.
Yeah, as I understand from a bunch of stuff that I'd done before this, actually, but also research from this episode, TV wasn't considered important enough to save in the 60s. Home video hadn't been invented. So there was no particular reason for them to think that they would ever need any of this again. Reruns also didn't really exist as a thing.
Yep.
Most television was in fact recorded live. Wasn't necessarily broadcast live, but it was recorded live.
So, it's sort of we got some film, we're going to roll it through the broadcast device there, and then it goes in the back room.
Yeah, editing was not really a thing.
Yeah. And so if it's a crap episode because no one can do their acting well, oh well.
Leads to some fun stuff. I'm sorry, I was watching a thing a bit ago, a review of a lot of these older ones, and he said it leads to some flubbed lines, but the line that apparently was flubbed was like the best burn I've ever heard the Doctor do to a companion. And it's like, I forget the thing. It was something about like maybe a caveman or something thawing out from ice. And he goes, "Won't he melt?" And the Doctor says, "Oh no, not at this temperature. Plus it's far too cold."
The Doctor's like that sometimes.
So flubbed lines are very great, and I think that they should do more of them in modern ones.
Yes, because having everything perfect, it's good, I guess. But sometimes a little meta humor, at the expense of a perfect product is kind of nice, and also I guess helps with the separation between the reality that we're being sold and our own lives. Because maybe people take too much media too seriously these days, and having more flubs might actually help counter that. So,
good. But yeah, this era very specifically, and from what I heard and found in my research, Patrick Troughton, who this is him, second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. You'll get into more cast stuff in a minute, I'm sure, but more than half of his run on Doctor Who was destroyed in lack of archiving. Intentionally destroyed. They were like, we don't need this anymore, burn the tape.
Yep. We need more room for stuff we're not going to keep either. I guess one of the things that actually helped save a number of early Doctor Who adventures, in part or in total, was that they were exporting the show to other countries. So occasionally, in the years since the initial destruction of various recordings, some of them have been found in overseas, back rooms or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, we still have a copy of this that we just never bothered to return to the BBC because no one asked us to. And so there's from various countries from around the world, they've managed to reassemble some episodes, almost to their entirety or beyond, or to entirety. But for this one, they weren't able to do that. However, there was something that was recorded by basically folks at home, the audio. So we actually do have the complete audio of this adventure, and as well as all the other missing adventures, because people really liked Doctor Who, and without, video recorders, they still were able to make use of tape recorders. And so, just set up a microphone next to your TV and turn on the show, and there you go.
Yeah, I find that one of those fascinating technological crossover points. Nobody had home video yet. The idea that you might want to rewatch television was not a thing for people, but people had audio recorders, and this is so close to the television radio crossover point that people would still have been very used to the idea of only hearing the audio of something.
Indeed.
So the idea of re-listening to a TV series as audio would have been a pretty good option for someone who wanted to re-listen to their favorite show.
Yeah, so people made these recordings so they could do exactly that. And then later when, maybe we should have not destroyed those episodes, people were like, hey, well, I got the sound files, you want those? And so they were able to, for this adventure and a few others, actually recreate the entire adventure through animation, just by making use of the sound to, be part of the what they have left of the original, and combined it with some animation here. Now, the animation is either sort of a love it or hate it sort of thing. I actually kind of find it endearing, and it is, I guess, kind of interesting how the human characters and the Daleks are sort of animated in this adventure, where the humans are full 2D sort of almost almost flash animation sort of style, where they're very sort of rigid, and their mouths move, of course, and they have expressions, but it's very much, this is the flat expression for when they're desperate or angry or happy, and then their mouth moves sort of as its own thing, and then their mood changes, their face, changes all at one sort of moment. So it's a little weird, but the Daleks are actually animated via 3D, so they look drastically different than all the human characters around them.
Yeah, it's kind of strange when they have the complete... There's a couple scenes in here that are just the Daleks, and they are also in a 3D rendered environment. And it's a completely different show all of a sudden. But yeah, if you haven't watched or looked up any of these things, it's very much the new style of cheap animation. The older style of really cheap 2D animation was like He-Man, Hanna-Barbera stuff. Then that had its own aesthetic. I'm forgetting my years. Sometime in the mid 2010s, there was a crossover from the old way of doing from hand-drawn animation, had a crossover into some more modern vector-based animation programs that everyone switched to. That's like that weird crossover point that you hit when like the Simpsons intro changed. They redid it in more modern vector-based animation programs, which this is all done in a vector-based animation program with a lot of tweening. It's fairly obvious.
Yes.
And then it's done in a lot of series of 2D stills with minor tweening animation, and no real attempt at doing anything other than a 2D still. It kind of reminds me of Archer in a way.
Oh, but yeah.
With the flat animation, and no attempt to make the flat animation look like it's not flat animation.
And so it kind of becomes its own style as a result. Yeah, this is an episode that has come back from the dead. Ooh, it's a ghost.
Which is interesting. I mean, it is a little unfortunate, because everything that I read does suggest that, especially for this era of Doctor Who, Patrick Troughton's performance was 90% physical acting.
Yes.
Which leads to a bit of a problem when he's a still animated figure.
Yes, they do try to showcase a little bit. However, some of it they couldn't get to be up to what they wanted as far as standards goes. And so when this was actually released as the animation originally, some of his physical acting bits were actually cut because they're like, it's just too awkward. We can't animate it right. But they eventually put them back in.
It's all right. I'm done. I've waffled on with everything that I know about this. You can do cast stuff if you want.
Right. So we should probably start off with the writer here, David Whittaker, who is
sounds familiar.
Yeah, is a person who has done a lot of old Doctor Who, though Doctor Who and the Daleks as well, which was a attempt at a movie take on Doctor Who to sell the Daleks, because Terry Nation, who invented the Daleks, is all like, I want to make more money.
Oh yeah, there was a weird copyright thing with the Daleks, wasn't there?
Yeah, and so, Terry Nation would, get paid anytime they show up, for starters, and, like, oh, you're the guy that's sort of, involved here, so we're going to, have you head up the Dalek episodes whenever you're free. But eventually starts just sort of, like, reusing his scripts, and they're like, you need to give us something new. But David Whittaker, did a number of... a classic Who sort of adventures here, Crusades, Power of the Daleks, which is what we're covering today. I think something about the Wheel in Space, maybe? But
oh yeah, that.
But he's also someone who did a bunch of other stuff as well. Like The Far Country, or what's this? Mr. Rose, Subterfuge, and Showtime. I think these are all British shows, so that's why I've not heard of any of them. So as far as actors goes, we have our main fella, who is playing the Doctor, Patrick Troughton. So what do you know about Patrick Troughton, Gepwin?
Well, I did a lot of reading for this episode, so I know that he was a fairly well-known character actor before this. Mm-hmm. He took over in what was a really weird, ballsy move for television at the time, because the original Doctor was getting a bit too old to continue playing the Doctor on TV, and instead of doing the standard television thing, which would either be to cancel the show or try to cast a look-alike and pass it off as the same person, mm-hmm. they decided to put in what we all in modern Who now know as regeneration, which is the Doctor just changes bodies every once in a while. But this is the first time anything like that had ever been done for anything. So it was a pretty ballsy move.
But it's like, he's an alien, we can get away with it, right? Sure, okay. Which, it being sort of the Doctor Who in total being sort of a very loose and fast and loose sort of sci-fi, you can kind of pull stuff like that whenever you like in order to sort of justify doing something either from a production standpoint, or you want to do this one cool plot thing. But yeah, as far as Patrick Troughton's roles, he was in tons of stuff. Toad of Toad Hall, he was Mr. Badger back in 1953. He was Robin Hood in Robin Hood, a TV miniseries.
That's
also
true. First TV portrayal of Robin Hood, apparently.
He was also in the Scottish play, where Macbeth. Some of his earliest roles were like as sort of Shakespearean sort of stuff, like in Hamlet. He was Horatio back in the 40s. So yeah, he was doing stuff for quite a bit before Doctor Who, as well as after. He was in something called Bognor in 81. He was in The Two Ronnies in 84, not the Ronnie, but he was also in The Two Doctors in Doctor Who after his stint as the Doctor.
Yeah, one of the first those crossover episodes.
Indeed. They did those occasionally, and he was like, I'm cool with keep doing this here. And yeah, so unfortunately now he has passed away as of 87, but yeah, he did a lot of cool stuff over the years. We also got his companions. Michael Craze is playing Ben, and really it's sort of another thing where I don't know what a lot of the stuff is here. Yeah, he was in Dixon of Dock Green, Target Luna, the Dick Emery Show, and other things. But he was also in Z-Cars.
That's better, that one.
Yes. I think we've joked about that one previously. It's not as infamous as the FBI, but, there is Pamela and Davy. Kind of a similar thing going on. The Saint, Second City Reports, Be My Guest, Fatty and George, where she was a bunch of episodes there. Hasn't really acted since the 80s, though, and she's unfortunately also passed away, which is kind of, the case with a lot of the actors here. So we also have a number of guest characters for this adventure. We have Nicholas Hawtrey as Quinn, Robert James as Lesterson, Richard Kane as Valmar, Edward Kelsey as Resno, Steve Scott as Kettle, Anna Willis as... sorry, I messed up. Pamela Ann Davy was Janley. Anna Wills is Polly. Sorry about that. And I'm not seeing on my list here Bragan's actor. Whoops. Never mind that.
I will say, I don't know if it was the animation or if it was just the style of the time. This is a lot of weirdly interchangeable looking white dudes.
Mm-hmm. Like Resno and Valmar, it's like, yeah, they kind of look the same. Some guy with, awkward look to him and dark hair. They have different name tags, though, so that's useful.
Yeah, the name tags were very helpful, I will say.
Yeah, I guess the only folks that don't have them all are the Doctor and his companions and the Daleks. But
the Doctor has a name tag; it just doesn't have his name on it.
Yes, he is the man of mystery.
Well, what was it? Inspector? It wasn't Inspector. It was something else.
Examiner.
There we go. Yeah, it was weird because why didn't they just call him Inspector? That was my question.
Well, it's sci-fi. You have to change things up as far as what their naming is concerned here. Probably. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot of actors here, and unless you want this adventure to go on for, this episode to go on for ages, we should probably actually get going forward here. Anything?
Yeah, it's one of those old-timey shows that just had a lot of characters who show up for a lot of interchangeable stuff. This is something that in modern TV, several of these characters would have been just, bolted together to streamline the casting.
It's like, we need an extra mook here. You look like you might be able to act someday. Get over here. Versus,
there's some characters like this guy doesn't need to be two different people. This could be one character, and it would be fine. And I'm in a cynical mood today, so we'll see how that goes with old TV.
So, Kebble's probably someone you don't care about then.
I literally do not remember which one Kebble was.
He was the third string mook who gets beat up at some point. Anyway, shall we get started with our synopsis?
Yes. Off we go to the world of the something.
The power of the Daleks. We open with the last moments of the previous adventure. The TARDIS at the South Pole, the Doctor fiddling with controls, and then falling down to regenerate into his new incarnation. After the always amazing title sequence, Ben and Polly are arguing about their unconscious friend. Ben is skeptical of this whole regeneration stuff. The Doctor wakes up and starts having a bad time. Once things have chilled a bit, he starts fiddling with the controls and they're off to the next adventure. The Doctor's cloak and ring fall off as the argument about who he is continues. Ben tries to confront the Doctor, but the Doctor's too in his chest of artifacts to care. He pulls out a chunk of metal that prompts him to say, "Extermination." He also pulls out a recorder, the musical instrument, and starts playing a jig.
Yeah, he keeps playing this thing. I know this is like a reoccurring thing with his character for some reason. He just pulls out a recorder and then annoyingly plays a recorder.
Yes. It's been sort of argued that, that's part of his means of keeping people off balance in terms of taking him seriously or not. Because if he seems a fool that just plays his little musical instrument constantly to annoy people, then he's no threat, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what Ben thinks is happening, because he just watched a guy transform in front of his very eyes. But the Doctor's being very unhelpful in any of this. He keeps referring to himself in the danged third person. It's like, who are you? It's nah.
Do you know who we are? Well,
don't worry about
it. So while catching up on his own diary, the Doctor decides to wander outside. Outside is a very pleasant mercury swamp. After some precarious wandering, the Doctor stumbles across a guy. The guy starts to introduce himself, but promptly gets shot by a mysterious figure. The Doctor, after some bafflement, takes the guy's badge. The badge declares, Vulcan, Earth Examiner, accord every access.
First person we see in the entire episode just is like, oh, hi, and then he's dead.
Yep. It's like, well, that was over fast. The mysterious figure with the gun seems about to kill the Doctor too, but Ben's calls to the Doctor prompt the murderer to flee for the moment. The Doctor, now wearing the Examiner badge, gets knocked out by the murderer. The attacker leaves in his hand a button, a piece of evidence. Sometimes later, a couple guys, Quinn and Bragan, are inspecting the Doctor. Ben is brought over with an unconscious Polly. Ben, being awake, is introduced to the guys. Bragan is head of security, and Quinn is the deputy governor, and I guess they just wander into the swamp sometimes. and they were not expecting an Earth examiner. Bregan mentions to Ben something about Lesterton's space capsule. Meanwhile, Lesterton is polishing some metal. Janley pops in to inform him of there being an examiner about. Lesterton's like, whatever, they can't stop me looking at this capsule. Ha! Janley is more interested in having a room for some sort of group that she argues represents better people to run things around these parts. So that's maybe some hint of what her loyalties are about. Lesterton doesn't care about politics, though. Just the technological miracle before him, the capsule.
It's a pod. It's a pod with a door in it.
Yes, a pod with a door in it. That seems weirdly large on the inside, we'll find out later. The Doctor and his companions are set up in a waiting room. Ben wants to recap what has happened. The Doctor wants to play a tune instead. On his recorder, Hensel, the governor, drops by to say hi and to make it clear that they weren't expecting an examiner. The Doctor, taking on the role of the examiner, starts examining Bregan in a very awkward manner. The governor mentions rebel groups. Bregan mentions the capsule. The Doctor is more curious about the latter. Later, the Doctor is inspecting the capsule. He spots a piece of metal that has fallen off the capsule, and he mutters, "Exterminate," while Lesterton explains how he'll open the find. One sci-fi gadget used later, the capsule opens. Inside is an empty compartment. The Doctor's like, okay, enough of this for tonight. Everybody go home. Later, the Doctor wanders back into the lab. Using the mystery piece of metal, he pokes a button inside to open the inner door. Inside is some Daleks, immobile and covered in cobwebs. There's also a spot where there's no dust, implying a third, now missing Dalek. They also briefly spot a Dalek outside its armored chassis. Oh no! Stinger's music!
Though we don't know what this is yet, apparently.
Someone who has followed the Dalek episodes from, early on would make a guess, but, as far as, folks tuning in for this adventure, some sort of weird alien creature. Oh no!
Yeah, that's true. I wasn't sure how much we were supposed to know at this point, because they did make a pretty big deal about the fact that this thing was out of its armor.
Mm-hmm. And those in the know will be like, this means that these armored, the Daleks that we're seeing here just hanging out, they might not be dead. The second episode has Ben getting a light, where he's spotted by a guy named Resno. Resno will be important for like 5 seconds. They figured that Lesterton has probably been inside the capsule already. Meanwhile, Quinn tries to see the examiner, only to get hassled by Bregan. This keeps happening. Lesterton drops by his lab. The Doctor accuses him of hiding one of the Daleks. The Doctor wants the Daleks dismantled. Bregan,
you have a Dalek under your coat.
Bregan, who just kind of showed up, is like, you have no authority to order this dismantling. Come on. After everyone's gone, Lesterton checks in his closet, where he has in fact put the third Dalek, and he gets to muttering about his experiments. Bregan brings the Doc and his companions back to the waiting room. They're given fruit, one of which has a listening device in it, which the Doctor breaks after Bregan's gone. Once they can speak freely, they discuss the intrigues and get everyone up to date on what's going on. Meanwhile, Lesterton is trying to power up the Dalek. Back with our trio, Bregan returns to let them know that nope, they can't see the governor right now. He's like in bed or something. The Doctor decides to just radio Earth and get help. Lesterton has wired up the Dalek and starts to power it up. It begins to move, and it looks at Resno. The Doctor visits the comm room only to find the comms are done broke. An unconscious guy's there, and Quinn is lurking in the shadows. Bregan just drops in to find the scene, and Quinn holding a tool that could be used to damage the comm equipment. The Doctor presents the button he's been planted with, back early in the swamp. It appears to be from Quinn's outfit. Bregan's like, oh, time to arrest you, Quinn. Sorry. Lesterton keeps powering up the Dalek. The Dalek keeps eyeing up Resno. Then it shoots Resno. And Janley gets over to him and is like, oh, he isn't dead. Just trust me. He's fine. He's just a little unconscious. Ben and Polly argue about Quinn's arrest. Bregan drops in to bring the trio to the inquiry that next morning. Lesterton is giddy about the results of his experiments. He asks about Resno, and Janley's like, oh yeah, he's still very fine. He's just off recovering. Trust me. At the inquiry, Hensel tries to get to the bottom of things. Hensel's the governor, by the way. But I forget if I mentioned that. Anyway, but Lesterton shows up and to show off the Dalek. Its weapon has been removed, so that's good. So no shooting anyone right now. The Doctor's still freaked out, though. It also appears to be following orders. Celestian is trying to do the cell. It's like, these things will be great for the colony. We can do all sorts of cool stuff. Yeah. These things are going to solve all our problems. The Dalek then speaks and declares itself their servant. Episode 3 has Leslie still trying to sell the Dalek. Hensel and Bragan are happy, as it might mean they're able to handle their own stuff without help from Earth. The Doctor's like, I order these things destroyed. These things are dangerous. I'm going to call Earth as soon as possible. The inquiry continues after everyone else is gone, and Quinn keeps defending himself. Eventually lets on he sent for the Examiner. So him being the attacker of the actual, of the governor, people, and all this stuff here, it just doesn't make sense. Come on. Bragan's
he sent for the Examiner so that he could kill him. He has a personal beef.
Yeah. And then, Bragan's like, oh, but you do still have a motive. You want to be governor, and you're just messing things up here in order to cause chaos and take over. Hensel's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And, Bragan, you're the new deputy governor, so hooray, promotion. Quinn, go to jail. The Doctor fills with some tech while the trio discuss what to do. They spot Quinn being taken off to jail, but they opt to go to Leslinson's lab instead. Leslinson is testing the Dalek's chemistry knowledge. The Doctor drops in, and Leslinson wants him to leave. The Doc offers a truce. Janley then gets a mysterious phone call. While Leslinson continues his testing, the Doc sneaks off to fiddle with the power, trying to overload the Dalek. Leslinson stops him before he's able to destroy it. Janley meets with Bragan. Seems she's working for him, but intentionally stirring up the rebels. They talk about the Dalek's gun and how powerful it is. Seems Resno actually was killed, after all, and she just dropped his body in the swamp.
Yeah, I love it. They have the gun, and it's like, this is the Dalek's super secret weapon. It's like, how powerful is it? Well, it killed a guy.
Good enough. Janley runs into Polly and directs her to the comm room. Upon arrival, a guy named Valmar, who looks like Resno, grabs her and docks her out. Ben finds the Doctor in the waiting room. Ben's upset that Polly's gone missing, but the Doc is more concerned about the Daleks, so, Polly's probably fine. We don't have to worry about her. But Ben really isn't having it. The Dalek asks Lesterson about a machine, because to help, it must know everything. After an explanation about the device, the Doc is like, hey, I could build a better version. I just need some more materials and more power. So, can you get those things for me, please? Lesterson happily goes off to get the supplies. The Dalek then turns up its own power while no one's watching. The Doctor spots Lesterson and figures it's time to head back to the lab. The Dalek is like, hey, you can't be here. Then the other two roll out of the capsule. Now all three are active. The Doctor's like, hey, let's cheese it? Because these guys have guns still. The Daleks that have a nefarious chant about conquest. Oh no. Hensel gives Lesterson full authority to experiment, but he's, heading out for a while, so, be good, everybody. Don't try to, usurp our power. Bragan drops by the waiting room to accuse the Doc of being a fraud. The Doctor's like, oh, but if you know that, then you must have been the guy who shot the real Examiner. Ha! At an impasse in their mutual animosity, Bragan leaves. Ben spots a ransom note to leave Lesterson alone so Polly won't be hurt. The Daleks have disarmed themselves. Lester's like, yeah, I'll give you all those things you want, like all that power. So the Daleks are like, cool. And then the Daleks start chanting about getting their power. Episode 4 has Lesterson a little freaked out by all this chanting, so he lowers the power of the Daleks to show that he's still in control. The Daleks are, okay, enough with the evil chanting for now. We'll be good. Also, here's your meteor storm computer design thingy. Bragan, now wearing his new SS-inspired uniform, is having Valmar fiddle with a TV phone. A Doc shows up with Ben to present the ransom note. Bragan's like, okay, I'll totally search for Polly, but, it's a big planet. A Dalek shows up to give Bragan some water. The Doctor then notes that the Daleks are moving on non-metal surfaces, so that's odd. They usually need some sort of metal flooring or something like that to operate like bumper cars with their static power systems. Huh. Hensel calls Bragan, and Bragan learns that the governor won't be back for a couple days. Neat. There's some rebel shenanigans, but the Doctor's more interested in the Daleks just running about. Also, there's 3 Daleks plus 1 now, so there's 4. Huh. The Doctor notices the rebels' secret messaging with the notice board. Lesterton's like, hey, Janley, the Daleks, they need more stuff. But, he's worried about the Daleks being rather independent now. Maybe the Doctor was right. Janley's like, oh, Resno. He's dead, actually. And if you don't want people finding about that, you were responsible for his death, and because of your carelessness, you're just going to go and continue with the experiments. So, keep doing it. The Doctor shows up to ask about why there's 4 Daleks now. He mentions they can do anything given the right materials. They're like super geniuses and stuff, so be careful about that. Lesterton starts to panic. Janley calls the guards and says that the Doctor and Ben attacked Lesterton, so take him away. Also, Lesterton, you look tired. Oh, hey, Valmar, time to install that power cable so the rebels can use the Daleks in their own efforts. The Doctor figures out the puzzle with the notice board. It's directions to a rebel meeting in the rocket room. They hide out that room, and the meeting begins. Valmar and Janley show off the modifications to the Daleks' gun so they can control it now. Also, there's a shadowy figure who's the boss, I guess?
Yeah, just in the corner. It's hard to see with the animation because he's just a blacked out figure. Also, I love the gun. They have a controller. Like, we can control the gun. It's a physical old school remote control.
Yep.
It's got a wire attached to the Dalek with a button.
Just, push this button and it's set to murder everything and flip it back and it's safe.
Yeah, it's like great security. Great security, guys.
Just hope they don't, grab their own remotes. So after the demonstration that they have control over the gun, I guess, the rebels start talking about Polly. Ben, hearing this, breaks out of cover and is instantly captured. The mysterious figure, after everyone else has left, it turns out to be Bragan, and he calls the Doctor, who's still in hiding, to come out because, hey, I know you're there, come on. Bragan's pet Dalek tries to shoot the Doctor, but the Doctor has a high dodge skill, so he just, gets out of the way of that beam. Bragan and the Doctor banter about their plans until Bragan has the Doctor arrested and taken away, because this secret meeting of rebels apparently has a guard outside. But, at least when the Doctor ends up in his cell next to Quinn's, it turns out the locks are total in nature. The Doctor chats with Quinn, getting him updates onto the plot. He even reveals that he's not the real examiner. Lesterton sneaks around his lab and listens in on some Daleks. He notices that they're conspiring together. Also, seems to be a real, a whole number of them now. He sneaks into the capsule. Inside, he spots the factory where the Daleks are reproducing. It's kind of a cool scene of 1960s era sci-fi. Lesterton is scared out of his mind as he watches the growing crowd of screaming Daleks.
It's very kind of Frankenstein-y. It's a very cool little sequence.
This is probably the one bit of the whole thing that is kind of like the money shot, where you're like, wow, this is like a massive improvement of what they could have even pulled off in the 60s there. And it's just kind of breathtaking, honestly. It's like, this is an evil Frankenstein lab factory here with spewing evil constantly.
Yeah, with burbly jars. One of them has a cattle prod thingy that they use to wake up their little mutant dude.
Mm-hmm. The central part of the Dalek is a biological mass that looks kind of just like a weird half-cooked hamburger patty. In episode 5, Lesterton tries to seal the capsule. Janley drops by to find Lesterton all panicked. He shuts down the power to end the threat of the Daleks. Also, let's get some lasers to dismantle them. He don't care about being blamed for Resno's death anymore. His attempts to call the Examiner go nowhere, and the Dalek comes outside of the capsule and points that they can now store power, so turning it off doesn't quite work now. Lesterton freaks out and leaves. He goes and runs around looking for the Examiner. Janley brings Polly to the capsule along with the goon. Also, the dogs want to know exactly when all this work on their new power cables will be done. In jail, the Doctor uses a glass to make tones while he ponders the Dalek's power problem. Lesterton stumbles in to rant for a few moments about what he's discovered. The Doctor asks for some more water to change the tone of his glass after Lesterton's, taken away. He's like, yeah, I kind of know what's going on. I just want to get out of here now. Bragan is presented with a ranting Lesterton while a Dalek fiddles with a cable for the power supply. just kind of holds up a wire. It's kind of funny. Once the Dalek is gone, Lesterson asks for the governor. Also, he says that Janley is in league with the Daleks. Janley and Bragan gaslight him hard, and then they have Lesterson taken away. Polly continues to be held by Valmar and that Kebble goon as they work on the power system. Valmar is like, oh, the Daleks will be our friends once we're in charge. But Polly retorts with, Daleks don't have friends. Come on, guys. Hensel is back in town, a little early, and notices a guard with a gun. That's weird. The Doctor releases Quinn's lock with the right tone, and they put the guard into a cell before they escape. Hensel confronts Bragan. Bragan reveals that the Doctor is an imposter. Also, Bragan's in charge now. Also, the Dalek here, go and shoot Hensel, please. The Dalek's confused as to why humans kill humans. But Bragan just wants, obedience from everyone. Valmar questions the need for more power. The Dalek is like, hey, we'll be more useful with more power. Honest.
Definitely not suspicious.
Yes.
Not suspicious at all.
The Doctor and Quinn show up. They discover Polly and and the goon, and then Quinn gadgets a dude, and in the resulting scuffle. The Daleks opt to wait until the humans start killing each other. Then more evil chanting begins. This time, exterminate! Quinn, Polly, and the Doctor find Hensel's body. Bragan drops in to say, oh, martial law now, and go to jail, please, you guys. The Daleks get the go order to start their rampage. The end of the episode 5. But episode 6 has the Daleks only getting into position to murder everyone. Janley tells Bragan that the revolution has in fact won. Cool. Bragan, though, is like, hey, we should kill all the rebels so they don't threaten me. Valmar listens in as Bragan ups the pressure on Janley to make sure she's on board with the plan. The guard escorting the Doctor and the company gets a punch to the face, and they escape. Valmar visits Ben to tell him that what's going down to the murder and all the rebel plans and all that sort of stuff. Bragan does a broadcast to try to put the blame of Hensel's death on the rebels. Doctor's group reaches the waiting room and hook up with Ben. The Daleks then start burning people as fighting breaks out. Janley meets Valmar. Janley's like, hey, we'll use the Daleks to win. That'll work, right? The Dalek's like, oh yeah, totally. Lead us to the middle of your group. The Doctor, after a brief venture in the halls, returns to the waiting room to push Ben and Polly out the window before a Dalek drops in to kill them. Janley brings a Dalek to the fight. It kills one of the Bragan's guards. Then it starts killing some rebels. Oh no! Dr. Ben and Polly return to Lesterson's lab. Lesterson pulls them into hiding. He's like, hey, the Daleks are just taking over now. That's fine, I guess, right? Janley then gets death rayed. Lesterson mentions that Valmar has set up a secret power cable, so he might know where it is. Or he could just ask the Daleks. They find Valmar, and the Doctor starts letting on he has an odd plan. Bragan panics as no one answers his calls. Everyone's apparently being killed or something. We see numerous people now dead or dying in the hallways. Bragan then calls to the Daleks to try to get them on his side. Ben and Polly hide in a closet. Quinn confronts Bragan and tells him to bring more guards to the capital to be used as a distraction as the Doctor engages his plan. The Doctor, now with Valmar, starts getting to work meddling with the power systems. But a Dalek shows up to mention that they have established their own power systems. But hey, the old cables, we need to deal with them and disconnect them. Also, they've been moved? Huh. Lesterson pops in and proclaims that he is the servant of the Daleks. The Daleks kill him as thanks for giving them life and, all that. But this keeps them focused away from the Doctor for a little bit, allowing him to fiddle with the power box. The Daleks try to shoot him once they notice that. But instead of, killing the Doctor, they blow up the power box instead, spurring an overload of the Dalek systems, causing them to all start exploding. Bragan grabs the gun from Quinn, but Bragan gets shot by Valmar, who's just done with Bragan here. Quinn's like, let's rebuild together, start a new beautiful future together. Valmar helps explain what the Doctor did to beat the Daleks by creating a feedback loop with their static power systems, just overloading all them and causing them to go poof. The Doctor's like, let's leave before they bill us for all the damages to the colonies and their power systems. Doctor gathers up companions, get in the TARDIS, and it leaves. And then as it's gone, a broken Dalek's eye starts to light up. The end!
This is very much still that era of TV where stuff's going to happen, and we'll explain why later.
Mm-hmm. It's like, we kind of got some hints that kind of establish some of the parts, but how it all fits together, yeah, we're only going to have a weird explanation that kind of ties it all up later. There's a reason the Curse of the Fatal Death has the Doctor going, "I'll explain later" several times.
Yeah. Power of the Daleks. Yeah, Curse of the Fatal Death was a very, very good Doctor Who spoof special that came out a while ago.
A little adventure where numerous actors played the Doctor, the Master's there's some Daleks, and everyone just being very silly. Also, they're on a planet where they communicate via farts.
Yeah, it's an amazing special, and you should look it up. It's pretty available.
But I would also recommend The Power of the Daleks. So Gepwin, have you figured out the number one, lesson of this adventure today?
Is it don't trust Daleks?
After fashion, yes. Though I suppose making it a little more broader of don't trust fascists might be a more universal sort of lesson there.
You've got a few things. You could don't trust fascists. The Daleks and the Rebels are both painted as fairly fascist.
Yeah.
You got rebellions are going to be turned to benefit the powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Your own weaponry can and will be used against you.
Yep. And maybe, poor Lesterson's particular lesson is, being obsessed about science, that's fine, but you might want to pay attention to what's going on around you, too, to make sure, what you're doing isn't going to be abused by nefarious folks.
Also, this was there was some very British stuff in this that I don't even know how much they intended or how much just sunk in there from the sheer Britishitude of the thing.
Yep.
the dismissal, he keeps dismissing that the Daleks are a threat by going like, what, you think they're smart or something? It's like you think they can talk, and then they start talking. It's like, well, now you think they can reason, and they build him a super machine. It's like, well, I'm sure they're somewhat intelligent.
Yeah. It's like humans are just awesome and superior, and the dog, the dog's like, yeah, we're your servants, and we're totally not better than you. Also, get us all the stuff so we can become, a terror upon this planet. But yeah, the main reason I wanted to cover this is actually that first sort of lesson there, that no matter how much you think you're in charge, when it comes to fascists, the only thing that they are interested in is growing their own power. And so never ever trust them or try to think you can make use of them for your own goals. If your goals be, high and idealistic, Lesterson's, or as, secure your own power like Reagan and the rebels are. That these are folks that are very specifically in it for themselves. And any sort of cooperation they'll give to you is a temporary alliance at best, and more likely than not being used to further their own power so that they can basically undo you and everything that you like.
I do find the Daleks to be an unfortunately clunky metaphor when you're dealing with fascism. I understand that we are still really soon after World War II. We're still in the middle of the Cold War as much as England, like the Brits, were involved in that. And as such, viewing the fascist allegory as essentially people who are genetically engineered to be evil does make a certain amount of sense for the time period.
Yes.
But removing that amount of nuance, because you have the line, and it's the one that everyone points to. And I'm sorry, I'm a cynical person who was raised on modern TV that tries to think about stuff, and it baffles me that people consider this a acceptable level of discourse. The one line that everyone points to in the episode is when the Dalek goes, "Why do humans kill humans?" And to me, that just reads like the frickin' Facebook post of, "Here's a dog and a sheep loving each other. Why can't humans get along?"
Yeah, this is a very, I guess, recognizable line from the adventure here, and I guess one interpretation is that the Daleks asking because it would be convenient if the humans just killed all them, each other, so the dogs didn't have to. But Reagan's like, oh, just follow my orders. Come on.
But I think that the potency of the question in the thing, it's like the Daleks are all working together because they're genetically engineered fascists, and the humans aren't. But you don't get an exploration of the question because the Daleks are too simple of a fascist metaphor. They aren't even really a fascist metaphor. They're just an evil entity stand-in. And it removes the actual nuance of the thing that you're talking about, which is both that, like, the fascists, the people in charge, the party members, are out for their own power. And you can't really use that for your own ends at all. But one of the things that brings about people allying themselves with fascism, and the idea that people in power who maybe aren't fascists start to ally themselves with fascist ideas, is that they rile up existing anger and frustration in a population. And for some reason, they're so full of themselves that they go, this unruly mob of angry people I just created intentionally and got really, really angry will only ever work for me, and certainly will have no unforeseen consequences.
Yep. I guess, to a certain extent, the Daleks, in terms of their origin in the, as far as their, creation for the show, we're very specifically meant to be stand-ins for Nazis. Because, Terry Nation, their creator, is like, I kind of want someone who is a recognizable bad guy that all us British folks can quite easily sort of point to. It's like, yeah, we see what this is. This reminds us of this thing that kind of just happened a few years ago. And so this will be evil, I guess, cut out for our antagonists here. And so there is a certain level of haphazardness to their sort of usage here, that the Daleks are a good stand-in, but also a bad stand-in, you could say. Because, they are so very specific and simple that it's like hard to sort of tease out some of the nuance. And so that's, I guess, one of the reasons that having a character like Reagan also in the story is, useful in terms of sort of making good allegories and things like that. That this is someone that is not genetically engineered to be super evil. He's just someone who wants, power for himself and will get rid of anyone who's going to be a, possible threat to that.
Yeah, they bring nuance into the Daleks later, but as they're being introduced here, Reagan's the only fascist in the episode. He's blatantly using the rebels for his own ends, and then as soon as they become inconvenient to him, he has them killed.
Indeed.
So we have that sort of thing in historical. There's historical examples of things like this, like, I'm going to ally myself with this rebel group in order to gain power, but then when they start asking for the actual stuff they were fighting for, they become inconvenient to me. So the Daleks actually work a bit better in this than in some other applications, because they have always only sort of struck me as almost more of a nuclear weapon allegory than a straight fascist allegory, because the amount that they're genetically engineered to just be pure evil is essentially they are simply living weapons. They happen to be living weapons that can turn against you.
Yes. If you try to make use of them, don't be surprised if there's a little fallout. Or a lot of fallout. So I guess I haven't actually run into too many folks making that particular observation, though, which I guess is kind of interesting in and of itself, because I guess there is so much known information about their creation and their reasoning for why that folks don't tend to necessarily think about what other sort of allegories can be sort of made use of in this case. That, because we have the answer from the actual creators, the authors, that we're not thinking about what else they could sort of represent. And I guess that's kind of a disservice to critical thought about Doctor Who and other sort of things where this sort of pattern happens.
A little bit.
So, aka, maybe not full death of the author here, but at least sort of put them aside for a little bit so we can maybe think about other things going on here.
Well, it definitely depends on which story they're being used in.
True.
As well. Because there's like 3 separate things that they tend to be used for. The third more so in more modern incarnations. They are either living weapons, and they can be seen very well as an allegory of very powerful weapons and how those can turn against you, usually not in a literal sense, but once you create a weapon, it's there, and there's no guarantee that no one's going to be able to use it against you. It's out of sight of your control.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily matter that in the text of the show that it's is under its own control at that point, or Daleks in general sort of control. It is beyond your control, so be careful about that.
Yeah, we're going to hit this in a later episode of Star Trek pretty soon, but right now, because of where we're at in our own technological discourse, we're very concerned with the idea of fully autonomous weaponry. But in a lot of sci-fi, no one was really thinking of a fully autonomous weapon at the time. But weaponry is an inherently double-edged sword, to use the pun. It can be turned again. Once you have a weapon, like, someone else can use the same thing. It's never one-sided for long. So it's giving them their own autonomy in a story is a very literal representation of that idea.
Indeed.
The other thing that I see them used for a lot, which wasn't in this, but there's several storylines in which they turn against their own leadership. Indeed. Because this is, in fact, the place where they work most as a Nazi allegory, but not an actual Nazi allegory. It's a critique of fascist ideology, because each of the Daleks is a perfectly programmed foot soldier who fully believes in their fascist ideals to such an absurd degree that they will, in fact, turn against their own leader or creators when they start to think about their own power too much, because that goes against the idea that the Dalek as a foot soldier is the superior being. And it does point out, it can be used to critique the central sort of conflict that you hit in a fascist system where you are considered to be a superior to everyone around you. Each individual cannot be any more superior than any other individual in this context, even though they all are supposed to be. And then you also run into this problem of, like, the true believer idea, where you've instilled a certain ideology in your followers and you hope that you can manipulate it. But if anyone believes in it too strongly, they will side with the ideology that you're using to manipulate them over you, who never believed in the ideology in the first place.
Indeed. So I should mention that in later adventures, Davros, the in-canon sort of creator, gets gunned down by the Daleks himself. Then they resurrect him, and I guess there's a civil war that happens, and and some of them are behind Davros at that point, and some of them are not, and then their homeworld blows up.
The Daleks get a little weird.
Yes.
The one that's not going to be used for a bit is kind of the Daleks as seeing the humanity in your enemies sort of thing. Where you should have compassion for them, even though they're emotionless, genetically engineered to be evil robot things. Or sometimes they have cause to question their own existence and what it is that they are actually trying to attempt to do here. And there's a not well used because they are not human. They are said to think completely differently from a human. They are genetically engineered and programmed to be this specific thing. But there is a inherent conflict in the way that humans think about other humans and in the way that a fascist ideology tells you to think about other humans.
Yeah, I guess one of the key portions of their in-universe sort of inception was that there's an attempt to make a creature that would be fully on board with its own survival at the expense of everything else. And the sort of folding forward interpretation of that means that any being that is not a Dalek is thus a threat and must be exterminated. And so the core bit of the ideology then is that, anybody that tries to, exist for starters, but also tries to control them is potentially going to put the Daleks at risk, and they can't have that. So if you want them to fight on your side in a conflict, they're going to eventually nope out and just start murdering everyone else, because they don't want actually to be, on either side of any sort of direct conflict there. Unless it's to promote Dalek interests specifically.
And I do think it's interesting when you're looking at it as just, if you're trying to view them as a fascist allegory in this episode, it doesn't work super well, because one, they're being constantly used by the only character who could be said to be fascist, or at least power hungry. But also the one thing that everyone pointed out about this episode when I was reading things and watching reviews was this is the first time that the Daleks are shown to gain power through manipulation and guile rather than brute force. And in order for that to work, I understand the story writing of the time, but in order for this to work, every other person in this entire episode is an idiot.
Yeah.
Is a complete idiot. The Dalek is there. It's like, of course I will serve you right up until I can kill you. It's like, what was that? Nothing.
Yeah, there's a lot of just conveniently unlistened to bits of dialogue from the Daleks, where it's like, the Dalek is about to declare itself superior, and it even gets the first syllable out, but then corrects itself, and it's like, oh, I'm your servant. Yeah.
I am superior, superior.
I have a speech impediment. Don't mind that. Also, we're going to start chanting letters. That's okay?
And they could have leaned into this a little bit more, but I still cannot tell whether this was intentional. That you could have written an interesting commentary on how people in these kinds of positions and with this sort of these sort of biologically based superiority ideas so completely underestimated the people that they were oppressing that they fully believed they were incapable of doing anything to them.
Lesterton's like, I can turn your power off. You can't fight me. Come on.
Yeah, these Daleks don't have the same kind of intelligence that I do. They're too stupid to cause problems.
Yeah, so we don't have to worry about them at all, even if they do start chanting. That's it's obviously just a for loop that they can't get out of that just keeps running over and over again. Because they're totally not biological beings deep down inside. They're robots, right? And
this has a double problem. Like that in itself you can have that as a story thing, and it mostly says don't underestimate people or you'll be sorry. But the idea that this happened, to the extent that this happened historically, there were definitely people who espoused these ideas, but we wind up in this bad position where, because of these ideas and because of the proliferation of needing to hold up these ideas, that the people that you were oppressing were naturally servile or too stupid to do anything about it or weak, we tend to not actually discuss the times that people did try to break out of horrible situations and the ways that people were fighting back. Like some worked, some didn't, and not all were like big rebellions. There are in fact like massive American slave rebellions that happened and were bloodily put down in a lot of cases, but they happened all the time. We just don't talk about them anymore and act like everyone just went along with it. But there were also a lot of passive kinds of resistance that were happening, refusals to work, bare minimum workload requirements, mass escapes or even slow escapes, slow trickles of escapes. Like there were a lot of ways that people were fighting back all the time, but we have this underestimating idea that proliferated through where we fully cover up these parts of history in order to maintain the idea that the people were just going along with things until someone in power decided to stop doing it because we found out it was wrong.
Yeah. I guess in terms of this episode, we do kind of have some quiet business going on with the Daleks themselves in order to do that sort of small trickle where they start reproducing and they're being super careful about not getting spotted in groups of more than 3 so that no one will take notice of what's going on. the Doctor already has by that point, but still. And so, this is sort of I guess, a thing that people are going to, resist their, general, oppression / being controlled any way they can figure out. And, just because we're not noticing it or we're not talking about it years and years later doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Though you run into a problem when you're looking at this as a oppression metaphor in any regard, because the Daleks are definitely a evil high-level threat to humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's kind of right that they be treated this way, because they are unavoidably evil. They will try to kill you for no reason.
Yes. So as far as metaphors goes, it's a little complicated on that particular front, yes. So maybe we shouldn't try to link the Daleks to the Underground Railroad. That it just gets awkward.
You do wind up with a weird thing where you have no idea what their power level is supposed to be for this episode.
Yep.
Because there's only 14 people in this entire colony that
pretty
we
close.
see. And the Daleks need an army of 50 to take this on?
There is, I guess, a certain level of assuming that there's a lot more people around than we actually see, but, it's a Doctor Who production from the 60s. They only have so much money for so many people. And, they kill off half the extras as is, so...
I know that some of this is stuff that happened later. I'm not familiar enough with where they had the Daleks at in the first season. But from our current understanding of Daleks, one of them could have taken out this whole place.
Pretty much. I know this is, far future humanity sort of stuff, but they're still running around with, sort of 60s era machine guns.
Yeah. Yeah. They really did not have much expectation that weapons technology would continue to advance in any way.
Later in Doctor Who, it's everyone has ray guns past a certain point, but not these guys.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you do have to laugh, too, at the ultimate threat in the galaxy. And when you see actual clips, the cartoon actually made it look better. But their guns in these things are a weird little egg beater looking thing. And then the screen goes negative. They just negative the screen. There's not even a drawn in laser beam or something.
Laser beams actually coming from the whisk from the Daleks is not really something you see until New Who, really. Even when they have plenty of movie magic sort of tech, in the 80s, it's we're just gonna do the negative effect because everyone's kind of familiar with that's how the Daleks beam works. This sort of effect happens, and if you happen to be fully on screen while it goes off, well, you are now dead. So congrats. But the but the Doctor again has a really high dodge score, so he can sort of avoid that most of the time. So, what do you think about Lesterson and his obsessions?
Lesterson was scientist dude, right? I have trouble keeping all these white guys straight.
Yes, he's the one that's the scientist that's obsessed and looks a bit gaunt.
Now, see, that one you can read into the weapon metaphor a lot better, because you wind up in this, I don't think it's a real thing, but you wind up with this idea that a scientist is just going to get so obsessed with doing their science stuff that they're not going to think through the real world implications of what they're doing. And so they're going to make the Mega Death Ray and go, no one would ever use this thing, right?
Right? Oh no, someone used the Mega Death Ray. So I guess I am, his sort of obsession, does sort of remind me a bit of the Manhattan Project and some of the stories that kind of came out of that. That past a certain point, once they were sort of in the work, they were fully on board with thinking about it as the work. But, to even get to that point, though, they still had to sort of make the moral calculus of, is this something that I want to do, that I want to contribute to, that will, not make the world a worse place as a result of my efforts here? But, and so there is still, in terms of real world scientists, that ethical question does actually get thought about. But, Lesterson sort of has a reverse order on things. He wants to do the work and then he'll worry about the ethics of it later. Or try to justify the ethics later.
That's how we keep imagining that this stuff works. They're not even worried about the ethics. They're so obsessed with the idea. But
this
even
is just
in
amazing.
things even in something like the Manhattan Project, the US government decided they wanted to build a superweapon and recruited all of the top physicists in the country specifically to build a superweapon.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't one guy in his basement going, it'd be really cool if I could split an atom and it would blow some stuff up.
Yeah, it's
and
like,
I'm not going to think about how that could be used.
Yeah, so it was a whole team effort, and not just one guy who happens to have his priorities backwards. And so it's not very much. It's not at all a good metaphor for that in terms of what actually happened, but it is sort of a trope where what people sort of expect scientists are like, but they're not.
The trope as metaphor could work. It's just never disconnected enough from the individual and the way that it clouds our vision of scientists.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a just narrative trope, if you're just looking at it as a metaphor, completely disconnecting it from reality, then this is a metaphorical representation of the idea of science in and of itself.
Yes,
because
so not the individuals, but the concept.
Science exists as a way to find out new things. Some of those things can have good implications. Some of them can have bad implications, depending on how they're used. Science doesn't care. Science is just a way of examining the world to find out things. When you put that onto the individual scientist, it becomes a problem because it's usually not made very clear as metaphor. It's in there as such a trope that it becomes the way that we start thinking about scientists in the real world.
Yeah. But as someone who is a real scientist, we do actually have more nuance than Lustigson here. That we do think about the why and not just the how.
Yeah, you just think it would be really cool to make those black holes at the CERN Super Collider and you'd watch the world get sucked in and take notes.
Whee! It always reminds me of David Brin's Earth. I hate you since I read that book. Anyway.
Also, the whole microscopic black hole thing always weirded me out. It's like, it would be a microscopic black hole. It's like, okay, but wouldn't that do nothing?
Pretty much. Because it will only be as massive as the energy you put into it or what it can suck up. And if it's too small, it's going to literally fall between, parts of atoms and not hit anything. So we're probably going to be okay if it pops up. Also, if it's charged, we can still contain it with magnets. Anyway. Did you know that black holes can have a charge?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So does that mean a magnetic field is unaffected by gravity?
That's a little bit more complicated. I'm trying to remember now a paper about plasmas being generated around black holes. Devin, you got me distracted. It's cool stuff, though. Maybe I should try to get into work on that. Anyway. So yeah, this adventure, I guess, has attempts at metaphor, but they are, I guess, super awkward. Are there any other sort of metaphors we could sort of poke at here that it's trying to do but kind of fails? I guess there's always Hensel, the kind of jerk, but trying to do the right thing, sort of governor who is being sort of manipulated. That
he's
maybe
just there.
Yeah, it's, I guess, a metaphor for civilian controls that are being are being unaware of the danger in their midst.
I mean, you actually can't really read much into the rebellion or political machinations because you just don't know anything about anyone at all. You don't know why they're trying to rebel. You don't know if this is a good or bad governor, what the political ends are, why any of this is happening in the first place.
So, do you remember how we talk fairly often about Star Trek in the 60s and 80s couldn't really address certain things? This might be sort of one of those sorts of things where if we have the rebels actually have a clear cause, then either as a result we're going to be sort of casting them in as either obviously the good guys or obviously the bad guys, and this adventure doesn't want to do that. Or alternatively, to have them have a particular stand would perhaps be one of those kinds of things where, the BBC is not going to put forth something that challenges Queen and Country as the end all be all and awesome good thing in the universe. So
You run into a problem, which I don't. It works as a generic conflict. Mm-hmm. Having them be rebels specifically actually creates a bit of an issue.
Yes.
Because you can't have them be trying to take over the colony for bad fascistic reasons, because that mixes up your fascist metaphor with the Daleks. Yes. But you can't have them try to take over the colony because of abuses of power or workers' rights or anything like that, because Britain in the 60s was not going to have none of that.
Yep. It's like we're barely tolerating our labor unions as is, and if anyone wants to try to go slightly further, they're the communists and bad guys.
By barely tolerating, we mean sending in the army.
Yes. We can't have them actually have an actual stance on anything. They're just the conflict group, which I guess it fits for the story, I guess, but it does sort of limit the ability of it to have more and more nuance, which would have been nice. But
it's interesting how many things from this era here's a generic rebellion. It went bad.
Yep.
Don't rebel, kids.
These rebels are fools because they trust the bad guys. Well, then don't rebel and you won't have to trust the bad guys. Trust us. So that's kind of lame.
I do think it's interesting that one thing that we didn't get to talk about was the character. This is the first appearance of Patrick Troughton as the Doctor.
Indeed.
And everything that I read, because I'm super not familiar with this era of Doctor Who, was he is what has become the Doctor.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, before him was Hartnell playing the Doctor. Hartnell was sort of a crotchety old man sort of figure, walking around a little hunchback and being smart and manipulative at times, but very much more like your weird grandpa. Troughton's like, I'm going to kind of manipulate things and be kind of a fool at times to throw people off guard. I got sort of a alien sort of way of interacting with people that can be off-putting at times, but can also be very direct and to the point. And if people are, not being fools like everyone in the colony is, then they can sort of catch on and be like, oh, this guy's actually right. He's weird, but he's right. We should probably pay attention to what he is talking about so that, we can solve the actual problems we have as opposed to, our own agendas.
I can see how they never quite hit this balance as well again. It's like, again, mostly having New Who as my metric, but Tennant was very acts a fool, but he's always got a complete handle on the situation no matter what's happening. You're just going to figure out how later.
Yeah.
Matt Smith, and later you kind of wind up with the situation just sort of resolves itself around them.
A bit.
And I see this really neat balance that you can strike with, they were just running around doing random stuff the whole time, and stuff seemed to just work out for them. But did it? How much were they actually planning any of this?
Sometimes a lot, sometimes none. Sometimes it looks like the other option, actually.
I can see that being a very difficult thing to write, so I see why it would be hard to hit that balance again. But it's a very interesting place to land with the buffoon character. It's like, is he just super lucky, or is he a genius? There's a line that you can't quite figure out.
So if Gepwin, you and listeners, if you want to sort of have more of this sort of catch you off guard sort of Doctor, Troughton is of course sort of the example, as you said. McCoy's Seventh Doctor is also pretty good on that, especially after his first season. Sort of fits more into the quote chess master role, where he's kind of a goofball at times, but at other times it's pretty clear that he's already figured out how to fix the situation before he even shows up. So it's like, oh yeah, I just kind of need to pop in and go through the motions, and it all went according to plan that I set up 500 years ago or something like that. But yeah, so I would recommend taking in more Troughton stuff if you're interested. It still has very 60s Doctor Who sort of vibes going on there, which some folks can't get behind, but it is still a good time, I'd say.
I will say it's a bit slow.
Yeah, a bit slow. I did think about doing the war games instead of the Power of the Daleks here, but as great as that adventure is, it is also 10 episodes, and some of them can probably be cut pretty effectively if you had the editing tool back in the 60s there. But I'd still also say that's a pretty dang good adventure there.
I think this era for me is worth looking at. Do not try to give it your full attention.
Yeah. it
won't work.
Yes, trying to delve too deep as we often do on Watches of Tomorrow does sort of expose some of the nuts and bolts on the hood that don't quite work. But it's still, something good to sort of take in and sort of more passively experience, I suppose.
Very old television, something that's been completely lost now in binging, streaming, rewatch, rerun, home video, DVD style television.
Yeah.
You had an entire week between episodes to completely forget everything that happened except for like the 3 important things that stood out.
Mm-hmm. So there's a reason in my synopsis there, we have this character sort of catch everyone up onto what's happened and what's important. I could have gone into the full details of what they discuss in that 3 or 4 minutes of dialogue, but just summing it up because I'm already doing a summary is much more efficient. But it does take a certain amount of time out of each episode to sort of get things circled and pointed to there.
Only other thing that I was going to say with this thing, it's completely unimportant, but this isn't a swamp.
Yep.
You keep saying swamp. It's not a swamp. A swamp has trees in it.
Well, maybe those weird circular rock outcroppings, maybe those are alien trees.
Unless they're the alien trees, yeah. A swamp has trees in it. It's a kind of wetland. It's a specific kind of wetland. Mm-hmm. It's one with trees in it.
Yes, the certain pH level too, right?
Yeah, and a lot of wetlands are that. Bog is very acidic, swamp is slightly acidic, and has trees. Marsh is a flooded grassland. Yeah,
what this sort of environment is, them calling it a swamp is probably just what they default to because they don't have a better term for it.
This is why companions didn't last long in this era, because you shouldn't probably stand next to that much mercury.
Yes. The Doctor at one point does kind of stand in a pool of it, but, he's the Doctor. He can get away with stuff like that. But, Polly just I'm going to hang out next to this mercury and accidentally breathe in some fumes, and now I'm unconscious and probably going to have health problems now. Great. But yeah, I guess they wanted a swamp so they could have a place to easily hide all the bodies.
Yeah, I mean, a pool of mercury, fairly good place to hide bodies.
Yes. Who wants to drain that, really?
I'm sure it would float. I'm pretty sure it would float. I think mercury is a lot denser than water.
Yes. So maybe if you put something even denser inside the body. Everyone swallow your neutron matter here, pills here. So you sink the bottom of the so-called swamp. So yeah, I guess that's most of the stuff I was sort of pushing for, because metaphors working or not working, it's something that they try in this sort of era of Doctor Who, and they can only sort of push it so far, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I guess the obvious lessons are being attempted, and for a very low level reading they can work. But trying to go too much deeper does kind of expose a lot of the behind the scenes sort of thinking there that doesn't quite hold up.
I don't think we have time to go into this now, but I think we should at some point do a whole retrospective thing where we do a few more episodes of this and do a hard juxtaposition of the ways that proto-60s British sci-fi failed as compared to how proto-American sci-fi was failing. Because both failed, and I think looking at how they failed in different ways is very interesting.
Yeah. Some of it's, definitely cultural sort of, reasons there. Others as perhaps just practices or even chance. There was, still some writers who, crossed the pond, as they say. But there was still a lot of sort of doing this in isolation sort of stuff here.
Well, I do think it's interesting from an American perspective. A lot of the Doctor Who from this era doesn't really feel that much like a 60s show as we understand it, because it is so unconcerned with the Russians.
Yes. There is occasionally, some references to the Cold War in Doctor Who, but sometimes it's like, yes, and we, talk to the Americans and the other ones about this thing that's happening. You can't even save the Soviet Union at all?
Yeah, it's
what?
kind of interesting it's kind of interesting to see the perspective of someone who was in it as an ally to one side, but was still rebuilding, so was very much sort of on the sidelines of the Cold War.
Yeah, we don't want to be directly involved here for the time being, but, it'd be nice to, still have an ally and back them up when we need to, but we also kind of want to do our own thing.
Yeah, America and Russia didn't wind up with as much like material damage from the war as a place like England did. So they were still rebuilding.
Yeah, there was plenty of Russia that was, definitely ravaged there, but that was like mostly on the rural side of things there, while major cities were besieged, but there was still a lot of Russia that was untouched directly from the war, because Russia's a big country. So stuff on the European front, sure, but stuff that they have closer to the Ural Mountains beyond, that was almost wilderness out there for starters. But what factories they did have set up, were kind of still there and able to sort of churn out things to help rebuild what they had left. While England's like most of our country got bombed. Like, we're having trouble finding places that we're not, so.
Yeah, they didn't do a ton of that in this episode, but I think it's interesting to see how they're still very concerned with fascists in a way that America should have been, but was not.
Yes. Hopefully, though, people being concerned about fascists remains ever in vogue going forward, and we don't let up and have a too much of a go at running things. So don't let that happen, folks. So Doctor Who.
Yeah, well, I think that's history, failed metaphor, fascism. Probably about time that we get into the galaxy's favorite game show.
Woo! Hey everybody, welcome to the Galaxy's favorite game show. Unfortunately, I can't make a really good British accent to do a British version of the same, but I'll see what I can do in terms of handing out prizes to our winners today. So, the various points have been tallied up, and we can start handing them out. So the first one is the Marks or Bust Revolutionary, which goes to Janely and the Rebels, I guess. Though their end goals are a bit nebulous, but we're not actually mentioning them, so they're probably something the BBC would not approve of. What do they win, Gepwin?
They win a tailor. Because, I get it. It's fun. They had fun uniforms, but, well-tailored military uniforms are just fascist. You can't get away from it now. They're the ones who care that much about aesthetics.
Maybe their whole revolution should have been about, allowing some variance in fashion, because... on this planet, everyone has to wear these jumpsuits, and they're all kind of the samey. Our second prize is the Washes Dinosaurs prize, which goes to Bragan for his betrayal of the rebels once they've helped him get into power, sudden but inevitable as it was. What does Bragan win, Gepwin?
They win the longer cord on their little button thingy. If you could turn the guns off, it probably would have worked a lot better. I get the safety measure, but when you have to stand literally 2 feet from the thing that you're trying to make not shoot you, it's kind of a problem.
Indeed. And maybe a few more of them, because, there is a lot of Daleks, and only a few of them were installed with the limiter. Our third prize is the Evil Twin Prize. Surprise, surprise. Which goes to the Daleks because they keep making duplicates of themselves, effectively evil twins, and they're all evil too, so, that's sort of a thing. What do they win, Gepwin?
Right, just because I really want to see it, they get one of the glasses with mustaches. So I want to see them hang the little mustache under their eye stalk. to be the evil twin.
I would so love that, actually. So, BBC, if you're listening, make sure that happens at some point. Our fourth prize is the For Science prize, which goes to Lusherson because for a while he's just quite fixated on studying the Daleks to the exclusion of everything else, which, allows horrible things to happen. What does Lusherson win, Gepwin?
Lusherson wins some models. It's a very good way to get out that weird frustration and focus on something. You can build a little model Dalek and not have to make one with a functioning gun.
Yeah. I believe Mr. Bean has featured one of those at one point. So maybe get you one of those. Our final prize today is the Antifa OG, which goes to the Doctor because he is laser focused on finding the Daleks right from the start, and that's a good thing. So the Daleks, they're kind of his number one bad guy, and the Dalek ain't gonna take much from them. So, what does the Doctor win, Gepwin?
The Doctor just wins shutting down all the debate on this stupid thing. This tolerant society cannot tolerate intolerance. And,
Indeed.
Like, these things are going to be bad. Don't try to tolerate them. I'm telling you right now, they pop up.
So keep an eye out for Daleks or fascists or anything in between, and do your best to keep them from gaining any power. So or I guess overload their power to make them explode. That works too, I guess.
I guess that is one place where the fascist metaphor works. When you see one, you got to get rid of them, or more show up.
Exactly. Because once you have one, they're going to be eager to recruit more or turn other folks to their ideology or to a similar ideology. Yeah, so keep an eye out for that. And the rest of us here will keep racking up some points and take us away, Gepwin.
Yes, thank you all for being here and putting up with the self-indulgent slight comedy that we call the Galaxy's Favorite Game Show!
So, Gepwin, what are we covering next week?
Now we're back to Star Trek.
Oh, then I should not do the Dalek voice now. Silly me.
Can you do a Michelle Barrett impression?
Not really, afraid.
Neither can I. My voice doesn't go that high. So we're back to Star Trek. We're in a weird one.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's not a bad episode. It's one that I have enjoyed from time to time, especially as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Coming of Age.
Yes.
It's essentially Wesley takes a test.
Yep. It's time to have him tested to see if he's super smart or ultra super smart.
I think it's interesting how many shows had the teenage stand-in character go do something that was basically, look, it's school, but it looks a lot more fun than your school.
Yep.
So maybe you envy this person going to school, because look how cool the stuff they get to do is. They're playing with a video game computer. And
it's going to be cool stuff, and you're going to have some neat alien friends to hang out with, and there's going to be, some meta tests or something like that as well, and you're going to have a lot of fun trying to pull it off, even though it seems scary at the time.
Some incredibly age-inappropriate flirting.
Yes. Whew, but that might just be, the kind of writing we have here at this era of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also run into a guy that wants to inspect things.
Oh, the inspector. He's back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The
examiner, whatever it was.
He is here to examine the Enterprise. Dexter Remick, I believe, right?
Yeah, Remick. You get a setup for some later stuff. Interestingly, the first season has a lot of setup for clunky setup for later things.
Mm-hmm. So it's not Doctor Who levels of continuity here, but there is continuity on display, and
so they give up on later. But
yeah. I guess to a certain extent, though, this is something close to a miscellaneous. We need to get all this stuff in an episode, so let's kind of get it together, and it's not bad. So, So yeah, coming of age. It's an episode of Star Trek.
Yep, it's definitely that. It's inoffensive in its blandness.
Indeed. I guess tune in next time for some more Star Trek: The Next Generation's coming of age.
Yeah, and you should watch it for the most undeservedly good set of editing that they have in any of these episodes. I'm not sure why, but they have like the most amazing seamless transition section of editing that I've ever seen in a Star Trek episode, and they use it for such a stupid thing.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that, and you should too, friends. Till next time.
Yep, next time, coming of age on Watchers of Tomorrow.
Next time on Watchers of Tomorrow, time to test out our Wesley. You have been listening to Watchers of Tomorrow, a podcast on science fiction media. Find and follow Watchers of Tomorrow on Podbean, YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Spreader, Digital Podcast, and perhaps many more to come. If you enjoy our podcast, make sure to subscribe for more. And where possible, make sure to rate your experience or leave us a review. You may find Gepwin on youtube.com/Gepwin and Twitter @Gepwin. You may find me, Dr. Isix, on youtube.com/Dr. Isix and Twitter @IsixLP. Music is Waveform and Mori's Principle, both by DRKRN. You can also check out the Watchers of Tomorrow Discord channel. Make sure to share the experience with your friends, family, enemies, and alien overlords. If you feel you are suffering from transporter syndrome, please be aware that the next time you step off the transporter, that you, that is now, no longer exists.